Okay, I want you to just imagine this for a second. It's a really deep, unsettling paradox that spans, what, 2,000 years of history?
Right.
You've got this one snapshot in time where a high-ranking government official, we're talking like a vice minister.
A very senior person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he struggles for 30 years, an entire career, just to buy a modest little apartment in the capital.
And then you just flip the calendar a few centuries, and you see something totally different. A common soldier, maybe a clerk,
Yeah.
earning an average wage. He can walk into a town and buy a whole house with, what, less than 2 years' pay?
And even in the capital, a courtyard home for 3 or 4 years of his salary.
So what on earth is going on? How can the value of something so basic shelter swing that violently?
That is the puzzle. That extreme volatility of what we are diving into today.
We're really looking at historical economics here, tracking housing affordability or, the total lack of it across these massive cycles in Chinese history.
From the Han Dynasty all the way to the Qing. And this isn't just about history. The mission here is to figure out if that intense pressure people feel today, that feeling that homeownership is just a dream.
If that's new.
If it's a new thing, or if people 2,000 years ago were feeling the exact same anxiety.
Exactly. And we're going to see how things like urbanization, government policy, and pure speculation drive all of this. And you'll see just how surprisingly modern these ancient markets could feel, especially when they were in a full-blown crisis.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The Han Dynasty. This seems to be our baseline, our golden age of affordability.
It really is. It's a model of housing as almost as a right. Something highly accessible and supported by the state.
So when you say affordable, what do we actually mean? Because the records from that time, these Julian bamboo slips, they paint a picture of housing being, practically dirt cheap.
Dirt cheap is the right way to put it, especially when you measure it against what people earned.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics, because the numbers, they feel almost made up by today's standards. We see a record of an engineer, a man named Xu Zong. His house was valued at 3,000 coins.
Right. And then you have a minor noble, Zhang. His place was maybe 10,000 coins.
Yeah.
So you see a range, but it's a very low range.
But the key is always income, right? So what was an ordinary worker making per year?
The estimates we have from economic records of the time put the annual income for a regular worker at about 2,500 coins.
Wait a second. So if you earn 2,500 coins a year, and a decent house costs maybe 3,000.
You see where this is going.
You could buy a house in a city like Julian in just over a year, maybe 2 years if you saved carefully. That completely changes your outlook on life, on everything.
It fundamentally alters what social mobility even means. It's a lot like, the post-war American dream of the 1950s.
The idea that one person, one salary, could pretty quickly buy a home and start a family.
That was the reality for the average person in the Han Dynasty. Accessible stability was just built into the system.
Okay, but there's always a catch, and the catch is usually the capital city. Did this affordability hold up in the big, booming cities?
It held up surprisingly well. Of course, prices were higher in a major city like Hanzhong. You're looking at tens of thousands of coins for a residence.
So more expensive.
Definitely more expensive. But even there, an ordinary worker could still realistically aim to buy a home after about, say, 10 years of work.
10 years of work in a major city. Today, people would kill for that kind of ratio. That's not a crisis. That's a functional system.
And it was functional because it was designed to be. This wasn't an accident of the market. It was policy. There are 3 big reasons why prices stayed so low.
Let's break those down. The first one seems almost too simple. It's just about a lack of competition for space.
Pretty much. We have low population density. The cities are growing, sure, but not so fast that they're overwhelmed. There just wasn't a severe, crushing land shortage yet.
But the second reason, that feels like the real revolution. It's about taking the most expensive part of a house, the land, out of the equation.
That's the land grant system. It's a total game changer. The state literally allocated land to people for free, including plots to build their homes on.
So wait, the government was the developer, and they were giving away the core asset at zero cost.
Exactly. So that 3,000 coin price tag we talked about, that's not the land value. That's just the price of the bricks, the wood, the labor. It's basically a materials and construction bill.
That is a completely different definition of the cost of a house. You're not buying a piece of the city. You're just buying the structure.
It changes everything, but they went even further. They had to stop the wealthy from just buying up all the cheap houses, right?
Right, speculation.
So they put in place these very aggressive anti-speculation laws. Specifically, something called the 2-year laws and decrees.
And how did that work?
The law was simple and very strict. It said, and I'm paraphrasing here, you are not allowed to buy a house that is not adjacent to the one you already live in.
I'm sorry, what? So you couldn't buy an investment property across town?
Or in another city. It completely shuts down the idea of a real estate portfolio. You can expand your current home, but you can't go play the market somewhere else.
That is radical. It basically makes housing a thing for use, not for investment.
That was the point. It was designed to maintain social stability. The payoff was that almost everyone could afford a home. The cost was that the elite couldn't use real estate to accumulate vast fortunes.
So that Han Dynasty stability, it wasn't a free market miracle. It was the result of intense state control over the most fundamental asset, land.
And that system was amazing while it lasted. But when we get to the Tang Dynasty, we see what happens when that control starts to break down. This is the pivot point. We're moving from a story about a soldier buying a house in 3 years to an official needing 30.
And that official was a real person, Han Yu,
Yeah.
a famous scholar, a statesman. He reached the absolute top of the civil service, vice minister, minister of rights.
And he's the one who complains about
Yeah.
it, right? In a poem. He does. In a poem called To My Sons. He says it took him 30 years of hard work, 3 decades, just to finally get what he calls his humble home in the capital.
A humble home after 30 years at the top of government.
Imagine a deputy secretary in Washington, D.C., or a top civil servant in London saying that today. It tells you that the official state salary, no matter how high, had been completely outpaced by real estate inflation in the capital.
And the fact that he's writing about it, it suggests he was living honestly on his salary. He wasn't corrupt. His personal struggle is, it's an indictment of the whole system.
It really is. It shows the official economy and the housing market were on 2 totally different planets. The market was just running away from wages.
So what broke? What happened to the Han model that led to this?
The biggest thing was the collapse of the equal field system. This was the policy that was supposed to keep redistributing land to the people. It was the backbone of that whole public housing philosophy.
And when the state stopped giving out free land,
The supply of affordable land just vanished. And it vanished right at the moment when demand was exploding. The Tang was a period of huge social and economic growth. People were more mobile, cities were growing, and all these new people flooding into the urban centers needed a place to live.
and now instead of a government office, they were all being funneled into a purely commercial, for-profit market.
And that demand didn't just meet a market, it created a hyper-commercial market. It's a sharp lesson. The second you remove state support and treat land as just another commodity, population growth turns directly into price inflation.
The Tang shows us what happens when that support system is just allowed to wither away.
And if the Tang was the pivot, the Qing Dynasty is where the bubble reaches its absolute peak. It's a crisis that is almost hard to comprehend. It's on par with the most expensive cities on Earth today, maybe even worse.
Right, the Song Dynasty is famous for its incredible economy, its technology, just a massive boom in wealth.
An unprecedented boom. And all that wealth and all those people got concentrated in the capital, Beijing. It just dwarfed anything that had come before it.
And with that concentration comes density, extreme density.
The numbers are staggering. We estimate the population density in Beijing was somewhere between 12 and 13,000 people per square kilometer.
What's a modern comparison for that?
You're getting into the territory of modern-day inner Tokyo. It's incredibly dense.
And when you have that many people packed into one place, housing stops being a financial problem and starts becoming a crisis of human dignity.
We have these heartbreaking accounts from the time. In texts like Qing Lu, they describe the desperation.
Tell me about the anecdote, the one that really brings it home.
It describes a low-income family whose living space was so small, so impossibly narrow, that the children had nowhere to sleep on the floor.
So what do?
They had to build little wooden planks, like shells, in midair, and they would stack boxes under them for support. The kids slept on these planks, stacked vertically.
That sounds like the cage homes you see in modern Hong Kong. Just grim.
It is. And they even had a term for it back then. They called it woju, a snail house.
A snail house. The idea that you're just carrying this tiny shell of a home on your back.
In the middle of this incredibly wealthy, glittering city, the contrast must have been jarring.
Okay, let's get to the prices, because this is where it becomes truly terrifying. What did it cost to live in one of these snail houses?
Well, even a single room, just one room, cost over 1,000 strings of coins.
1,000 strings. How do we even translate that into a value we can understand today?
It's always tricky, but if you peg it to the value of basic goods like grain, you're looking at well over 100,000 US dollars.
$100,000.
Super.
One room.
And that was just the beginning. By the late song, the prices were just astronomical. We have the actual records for a scholar, Suje. He bought a totally normal, ordinary house,
Not a mansion.
not a mansion, and the price was 9,400 strings of coins.
Okay, 9,400. So now we need the other side of the equation. What was a normal person, a handyman or a street vendor, earning?
They were making about 200 copper coins a day. If they worked year-round, that comes out to maybe
Yeah.
73 strings of coins per year.
Okay, let's do the math here. An ordinary house costs 9,400 strings, and you earn 73 strings a year. That. You'd need at least 128 years.
128 years. And that's if you save every single coin you earned and didn't spend anything on, food.
It's not a housing ladder, it's a wall.
Oh.
It means homeownership is mathematically impossible for the working class. Labor has been totally disconnected from the right to shelter.
It's a complete social failure. And it wasn't just the poor. Even a prime minister, the top official in the empire, would have to save his entire life's salary just to afford a large mansion.
So this crisis was a direct result of the song's success. It wasn't because of a collapse, it was because of a boom.
Exactly. It was the explosive concentration of wealth and people that pushed the system past its breaking point. They prioritized economic growth over everything else, and the snail house was the price that people paid.
So after that madness, something had to give. The Ming Dynasty comes along, and you see a huge market correction.
A massive correction. Part of it was, the chaos of the dynasty change, easing some of the open pressure. But the other big thing was a shift in currency. They moved to a silver-based economy, using taels of silver.
And this stabilizes things. We see it in sources from the time, right? Like the novel The Plum and the Golden Vase.
That's a great example. It describes a really nice house, 4 rooms, 2 courtyards, great location, for just over 10 taels of silver.
10 taels. Okay, so let's use our soldier benchmark again. What was a soldier earning in the Ming?
His annual pay was about 10 taels of silver.
You're kidding. So a soldier could buy a 4-room, 2-courtyard house with 1 year's salary.
Just about. We see other records that back this up. A small courtyard house in a good part of Beijing in 1640 sold for 33 taels.
So a soldier could buy a home in the capital with 3 to 4 years of pay.
It's an incredible reversal. It shows you just how fast affordability can snap back when the underlying pressures are reset.
So the Ming sets this new, stable baseline. But then we move into the Qing Dynasty, and things get a little more complex. There's a really interesting regulatory twist.
Right. Prices in the Qing started to rise again, steadily, but they never got back to the crazy levels of the song. But what's fascinating is what they did in Beijing.
Let's use another character from literature from Dream of the Red Chamber. Shi Run, she's a high-ranking attendant, basically a chief of staff.
And she earns a very good salary. Over 2 taels of silver a month, so about 24 taels a year.
Okay, and at that time, a small unit, 1 room, in the inner city of Beijing cost about 33 taels.
So she could buy a property in the absolute heart of the capital like buying in Zone 1 in London with a little over a year of her income.
Which is still amazing affordability, but that's not even the most interesting part.
No, the ultimate insight from the King is this bizarre price paradox they created.
Which is?
In King Beijing, houses in the inner city were cheaper than houses in the outer city.
That makes no sense. The center is always the most expensive part of any city.
Not here.
Yeah.
Because the inner city was where the government and imperial grounds were. So the government actively regulated and capped the prices there. They just weren't allowed to get too high.
But the outer city?
The outer city was a free market, pure supply and demand, driven by merchants and commerce. And so the prices there, in the suburbs, were higher than in the regulated prime central district.
So it's a perfect historical example of rent control or price caps actually working.
It's an excellent ancient case. It shows regulation successfully kept the most desirable real estate affordable, which is the complete opposite of what a lot of people might expect. They basically insulated the core of their capital from the market.
What a journey. We've gone from the Han Dynasty, where a house cost 1 year's salary,
To the Song, where it cost 128 years of salary, a total crisis.
and then back to the Ming, where it was 3 or 4 years again, and finally to the Qing, where government policy literally made the city center cheaper than the outskirts.
And the big takeaway for anyone listening to this worrying about their own housing market is that these massive swings weren't caused by anything magical or new. It was always the same factors.
Population growth, state land policy, and the balance between a regulated and a free market.
And it proves that affordability is fundamentally a policy choice. It's never just an accident of the market.
Which really brings us to that final provocative thought, doesn't it? It all comes back to the Song Dynasty.
It does. They had this incredible economic boom, so much wealth, so much trade, so much innovation, but they paid for it by completely locking their working class out of homeownership. They built their prosperity on top of those snail houses.
So if modern governments today are chasing GDP growth, letting wealth concentrate, and allowing housing prices to completely detach from what people actually earn,
Are they protecting the market? Or are they just setting the stage for the same kind of massive social failure? What is the true cost of a totally unregulated economic boom when you measure that cost in human lifetimes? If you found this discussion useful, maybe learned something new, definitely hit that subscribe button. We do these deep dives regularly, exploring valuable ideas.
we appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.